She sat at her kitchen table long after midnight, staring at a single photo. The picture was worn, the edges curling, but her eyes kept returning to it like a wound she couldn't stop touching. It was from the day everything changed, the day she lost someone she thought she could never live without. That one memory had followed her for years, whispering in the background of every moment, stealing her laughter, even haunting her sleep. She thought, if I hold on tightly enough, maybe the pain will finally make sense. But the truth? The more she clung to it, the heavier it became, pressing down on her like a stone on her chest. Can you see yourself in her? Maybe it's not a photograph for you. Maybe it's a failure that still burns when you think about it. A broken friendship that ended with words you wish you could take back. Or maybe it's regret, the kind that creeps into your heart when the room grows quiet and no one else can see your tears. We've all carried something we couldn't seem to put down. And sometimes it feels as if we're not living life at all, but simply dragging our past behind us, step by painful step. Here's the paradox. We tell ourselves we're protecting the memory, the story, or the person we lost. But in reality, it's not the memory that's holding on to us. It's us, gripping it so tightly that we bleed. Like someone clutching a rope that's burning their hands, we refuse to let go, even though letting go is the only thing that could set us free. Why do we do this? Why do human beings cling to pain, even when it's destroying us? Maybe because deep down, we believe letting go means forgetting. That if we release the past, we'll lose a part of ourselves. But Buddhism invites us to see things differently. It teaches that letting go isn't about erasing what happened. It's about loosening the chains that keep you trapped, so you can finally breathe again. I've met so many people who live with silent suffering. A man who wakes every morning replaying one mistake he made decades ago. A woman who whispers apologies in her mind for choices she can never change. Friends who laugh in public but cry in private because the past still holds them hostage. And perhaps you, right now, know exactly what that weight feels like. But here's the question. What if it doesn't have to be this way? What if freedom isn't found in holding tighter, but in opening your hand? The Buddha once said that attachment is the root of suffering. And in many ways, that's what we'll be exploring together in this video. Not just why we cling, but how to gently, courageously release what no longer serves us. Because letting go doesn't mean losing. It means gaining back your life, your peace, your ability to feel joy again. So, in today's journey, we'll discover what letting go truly means in Buddhism, why it's so difficult for us, and how we can begin practicing it in small but powerful ways. My hope is that by the end of this video, you'll see that letting go is not an ending, it's a beginning. And before we dive in, I want to say this. If you choose to stay with me until the very end, I've left a special gift for you in the description below. It's my way of saying thank you for walking this path with me, because no one should have to walk it alone. So let me ask you one last question to carry with you as we begin. What would your life feel like if you finally laid down the weight you've been carrying for so long? Stay with me, because what you'll discover in the next few moments may just change the way you live the rest of your life. 1. What letting go really means in Buddhism. Have you ever noticed how easily we confuse letting go with giving up? It's almost automatic. The moment someone says, "You need to let this go," a voice inside us replies, "But if I let go, doesn't that mean I've failed? Doesn't that mean I'm running away from my responsibilities?" This is where we often get stuck. We equate letting go with weakness. We believe it means walking away from the people we love, neglecting our duties, or abandoning our goals. But in Buddhism, letting go has an entirely different meaning. It's not about turning your back on life. It's about releasing the tight grip that keeps you chained to unnecessary suffering. Think of it this way. Imagine holding a glass of water. At first, it feels light, but if you keep holding it for minutes, hours, even days, your arm will begin to ache. The glass hasn't changed, it's still just a small weight. What changed is the tension you chose to carry. Letting go in Buddhism is like setting that glass down. You're not denying the water exists. You're simply freeing your hand so it no longer hurts. The Buddha used the word upadana, often translated as clinging or grasping. It's not the event itself that creates the most pain, it's the clinging. A relationship ends, that's painful. But it's the endless clinging to why it ended, what could have been, how it should have been different, that prolongs our suffering for years. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean indifference. In fact, I believe true letting go allows us to care more deeply because we're no longer blinded by fear or attachment. When you let go of controlling someone, you can finally love them for who they are, not for who you wish they would be. When you let go of a past mistake, you give yourself permission to grow instead of punishing yourself again and again. And here's something I've learned personally. Letting go feels like a small death at first. It feels like you're losing part of your identity because so much of who we think we are is tied to our stories, our regrets, our attachments. But Buddhism teaches that what we're really losing is the illusion, the false idea that clinging will protect us. Once that illusion falls away, what remains is something stronger than attachment, freedom. So let's clear this up once and for all. Letting go is not avoidance. It's not suppressing emotions. It's not pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's facing reality exactly as it is, without adding the chains of should, if only, and why me. That's why in Buddhism, letting go is also called release. Not because we escape life, but because we finally stop fighting against it. Think about your own life for a moment. Is there something you've been carrying that feels heavier with each passing day? A memory, a person, a dream that didn't unfold the way you hoped? What would happen if you placed it gently down, not thrown away, not denied, but simply released from your grip? The truth is, letting go doesn't mean life becomes empty. It means life becomes spacious. It's like opening the windows of a stuffy room and letting in fresh air. Suddenly, there's room for peace, for clarity, for joy. And I want to hear from you. In the comments, share one thing, just one, that you know is asking to be released. Not because you're weak, not because you don't care, but because your heart deserves to breathe. Because the moment you begin to understand what letting go really is, something shifts. You realize it's not about losing. It's about gaining back the one thing you've been longing for all along, inner peace. And that brings us to the next question. If letting go means freedom, then why is it so painfully hard to do? That's what we'll uncover in the next part of our journey together. 2. Why we suffer. The grip of attachment and ignorance. Have you ever asked yourself this simple but haunting question? Why does it hurt so much to hold on? It doesn't matter if it's money, love, recognition, or even an old memory. We cling to it as if our very life depends on it. And yet, the tighter we hold, the heavier it becomes. The Buddha was very clear about this. He said the root of all suffering is tanha, craving, attachment, the constant grasping at what we want, or the desperate running from what we fear. It's not the world itself that creates so much pain. It's the way our minds cling to it. Think of someone chasing wealth. At first, money gives them comfort. They work harder, sacrifice their health, and maybe even their relationships, believing that just a little more will finally bring peace. But does it ever? Or think of love. When we fall in love, it feels beautiful. But when that love becomes possession, when we demand the other person never change, never leave, never disappoint us, that love slowly transforms into chains. And then there's the past. Have you ever noticed how we can relive an old mistake over and over, as if punishing ourselves today could rewrite yesterday? That's also clinging. The moment has already gone, but the mind keeps replaying it like a broken record. I've been there myself. There was a time I carried a deep regret about a choice I made, one that hurt someone I cared about. Years passed, but in my mind, it was always yesterday. I thought if I held on tightly enough to that regret, it would somehow make me more responsible or maybe even undo the pain I caused. But all it really did was keep me trapped in shame. The truth? My clinging didn't heal anyone, it only deepened my suffering. This is what Buddhism calls ignorance. Not ignorance in the sense of being uneducated, but ignorance of the true nature of life. We forget, or maybe we refuse to see, that everything is impermanent. Money comes and goes, relationships change, our bodies age, moments pass. But instead of flowing with this truth, we resist it. We grasp at permanence in a world that is constantly shifting. No wonder we suffer. Here's the paradox. The things we cling to often aren't bad. Money, love, ambition, even memories. These can all be meaningful parts of life. But when we cling, when we demand they never change, we set ourselves up for heartbreak. It's like trying to hold water in a closed fist. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Let me ask you this. What are you clinging to right now that feels like it's costing you your peace? Is it an image of who you think you should be? A version of someone else you desperately wish they still were? Or maybe a future that hasn't even arrived yet? I know these questions aren't easy, but sometimes naming what we cling to is the first step toward loosening our grip. And here's the hopeful part. The moment we see clearly that our suffering comes not from life itself, but from our attachment to it, we begin to reclaim our power. We realize pain is part of being human, but suffering is optional. So, if the root of suffering is craving and clinging, then how do we actually break free? How do we move from simply knowing this truth to living it? That's what we'll explore next. The actual practice of letting go, not as a lofty idea, but as a daily, lived experience. And before we move on, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one thing in your life you feel attached to? Something that both comforts and hurts you at the same time. You might be surprised how many people feel the exact same way you do. 3. The 3 pillars of letting go: impermanence, non-self, and compassion. Here's a paradox worth sitting with. We all want peace, yet we keep gripping tighter to the very things that disturb our peace. So, what's the way out? In Buddhism, the path of letting go rests on 3 timeless truths: impermanence, non-self, and compassion. Think of them as 3 pillars holding up the bridge that carries us from suffering to freedom. Let's start with impermanence. Everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. And yet, how often do we live as if life should stay still? Maybe it's a relationship you want to freeze in its happiest moment, or a success at work you hope will define you forever. But reality doesn't work that way. The Buddha compared life to a river. It keeps flowing whether we want it to or not. I remember talking with a friend who lost his job after 20 years at the same company. He told me, "It feels like the ground beneath me just disappeared." What he didn't see at first was that even those 20 years of stability were changing every single day, subtly, quietly, until the shift became too big to ignore. Impermanence is not meant to scare us. It's meant to wake us up. When we truly see that everything is passing, we stop clinging quite so desperately, and we start appreciating more deeply. The second pillar is non-self. Now, this can sound abstract, but it's really quite simple. We tend to believe in a fixed, unchanging me, my identity, my reputation, my story. But who we are is not one solid block. It's a flowing combination of body, thoughts, emotions, and experiences, all changing moment by moment. Here's an example. Have you ever looked back at an old photo of yourself and thought, that doesn't even feel like me anymore? That's non-self in action. The you of 10 years ago is not the same you of today. So when we cling to a rigid sense of, this is who I am, we set ourselves up for struggle. Non-self isn't about erasing our identity. It's about loosening our grip on it, allowing ourselves to evolve, to breathe, to be free. And finally, the third pillar, compassion. This is where letting go becomes soft instead of harsh. It's one thing to say, everything changes, nothing is mine to control, but without compassion, that truth can feel cold. Compassion warms it. It teaches us that letting go isn't about rejection, it's about love. Think of it this way. When we forgive someone, we're not excusing what they did. We're choosing not to carry the weight of resentment anymore. When we show kindness to ourselves after a mistake, we're not ignoring responsibility. We're simply refusing to let shame chain us down. Compassion is what makes letting go a healing act, not just an intellectual idea. I've learned this personally. There was a time I held anger toward someone who betrayed my trust. I thought if I let go of that anger, it meant they had won. But over time, I realized the only person losing was me. Compassion didn't mean I had to keep them in my life. It meant I no longer allowed their actions to poison my heart. That was the real freedom. So here's the question for you. Which of these three pillars speaks to you most right now? Impermanence, learning to accept change? Non-self, loosening your grip on who you think you must be? Or compassion, choosing forgiveness and love instead of bitterness? If you're open, share it in the comments. Sometimes just naming what resonates with us is the first step toward transformation, and you might be surprised to see how many others feel the same. Together, these three truths, impermanence, non-self, and compassion, are not abstract philosophy. They are living practices, invitations to experience life with lighter hands and a freer heart. Now, knowing these pillars is one thing. But how do we actually live them out? In the middle of stress, conflict, and daily responsibilities. That's what we'll explore next. Practical ways to begin letting go. Not tomorrow, not in some perfect future, but right here, in the life you're living today. 4. Practicing mindfulness to let go. There's a simple yet powerful practice that can turn the weight of our emotions into a doorway toward freedom. It's called mindfulness. Now, I know you've probably heard that word before. It's become popular in recent years. But in Buddhism, mindfulness isn't just about relaxation or reducing stress. It's about learning to see clearly, to notice our thoughts and emotions without immediately getting pulled into them and without judging them as good or bad. Let me ask you, how often do you find yourself reacting before you even realize what's happening? Maybe someone cuts you off in traffic and your chest tightens with anger. Or a single text message ruins your whole mood for the day. In those moments, we're not really free. We're being controlled by our own reactions. Mindfulness is the practice of gently stepping back, observing, and saying, this is anger. Or, this is fear. Instead of becoming the storm, we notice the storm passing through. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're in the middle of an argument. Your voice is rising, your heart is racing. Normally, you might push harder, try to win, maybe even say something you'll regret. But with mindfulness, there's a pause. You take a breath. You silently acknowledge, this is anger in me right now. Just that one step, naming what you feel, creates space. And in that space, choice becomes possible. I've experienced this personally. There was a time I struggled with deep resentment towards someone close to me. Every thought of them felt like pouring salt on a wound. But when I practiced mindfulness, I stopped fighting the resentment and instead just noticed it. I would sit quietly, breathing, and say, "This is resentment. It feels heavy, it feels sharp, but it is not all of me." Over time, that simple act of watching loosened its grip. The emotion didn't vanish overnight, but it stopped being my master. That's the power of mindfulness. It transforms our relationship with what we feel. Now, I won't pretend it's easy. The hardest part of mindfulness is the patience it requires. Our mind is restless. It wants to judge, "This anger is bad, I shouldn't feel this way." Or it wants to suppress, "If I ignore this fear, maybe it will disappear." But mindfulness is different. It doesn't suppress, it doesn't judge, it simply observes, like a compassionate friend sitting beside us, saying, "I see you. It's okay." Think of your mind like the sky. Emotions and thoughts are clouds. They come, they go. Some are light and gentle, others dark and stormy. But the sky itself remains spacious, untouched. Mindfulness is remembering that we are the sky, not the storm. Here's a question for you. What emotion tends to control you the most these days? Is it anger, anxiety, sadness, or maybe even constant overthinking? If you feel comfortable, share it in the comments. Sometimes just naming what we struggle with can be the first courageous step toward letting it go. And when others read your words, they may feel less alone too. What I find beautiful is that mindfulness doesn't require any special tools or settings. You don't need a meditation cushion, incense, or hours of silence. You can practice in the car, at your desk, even while washing the dishes. Just notice, just breathe, just name what's happening. The Buddha once said, "Awareness is the path to the deathless." What that means is, when we are aware, we are no longer slaves to habit. We begin to live consciously. And when we live consciously, we naturally begin to let go. So as you move through your day, I invite you to try something simple. Whenever a strong emotion arises, pause. Place your hand gently on your chest, breathe in, and silently say, "This is anger," or "This is fear." Just that. Watch what happens. You may find that what once felt like a tidal wave now passes like a ripple. Mindfulness is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming present. And in presence, the grip of suffering loosens, and a softer, freer way of living begins to emerge. 5. Meditation, a powerful tool to relax the mind. There's a moment we all long for, a moment when the racing thoughts finally quiet down, when the tension in our chest softens, when life feels just a little lighter. That moment often comes through meditation. Now, before you imagine monks sitting for hours in silence on a mountaintop, let me pause you here. Meditation in its true sense isn't about escaping the world. It's about learning how to be fully present in the world, with a mind that is steady and open. Think of your mind as a glass of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, the water stays cloudy. But if you let it sit still, the mud naturally settles, and the water becomes clear. Meditation is that stillness. It's the practice of letting the mud, the worries, the stress, the endless chatter settle, so that clarity can shine through. The simplest and most powerful method is breath meditation. Just sitting quietly and watching the breath flow in and out. Nothing fancy. No need to control the breath. Simply notice, in and out. And when the mind wanders, and it will, you gently bring it back. Without judgment, every time you return, it's like a little act of letting go. I remember when I first tried meditation, I thought, this is impossible. my mind won't stop talking. And maybe you felt that way too. The truth is, the mind isn't supposed to stop talking overnight. That's not failure, it's practice. Each distraction is simply another chance to come back. And slowly, something shifts. The grip of stress loosens. The mind becomes less of a storm, more of a gentle breeze. Let me give you a picture. Imagine coming home after a long day, your head heavy with worries. Instead of turning on the television or scrolling endlessly, you sit for just 5 minutes. You close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, and breathe. At first, thoughts bombard you. I forgot to answer that email. Did I pay that bill? But then, with each breath, the noise quiets. Your shoulders drop. The space between thoughts grows wider. You realize, oh, I can breathe again. That's meditation in its purest form. And here's where it becomes powerful. Meditation isn't just relaxation. It prepares the heart for letting go. Because when we train the mind to be still, we see more clearly the truth of impermanence, of attachment, of compassion. A calm mind can hold difficult emotions without collapsing. A steady mind can forgive, can release, can love without clinging. There's also visualization meditation, where you imagine light filling your body or picture someone you love surrounded by peace. These practices awaken the heart, reminding us that we're not separate, that love and kindness are always within reach. Science even backs this up. Studies show that meditation lowers stress hormones, improves sleep, and increases feelings of well-being. But beyond the science, there's something deeply personal. It's that quiet smile after a session, the way colors seem brighter, or how you react a little softer to someone who once triggered you. So, let me ask you, have you ever tried meditation? And if you have, what was it like for you? Frustrating, peaceful, or maybe both? Feel free to share in the comments. Sometimes hearing each other's experiences reminds us that we're not alone on this journey. And if you've never tried, here's a gentle invitation. Tonight, before bed, sit for just 3 minutes. Close your eyes. Feel the breath entering your nose, leaving your lips. When thoughts come, don't fight them. Just notice and return. 3 minutes. That's all. You might be surprised how different you feel afterward. Meditation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you are when the noise fades away. A quiet, compassionate presence, a steady heart, a mind ready to let go. So the next time life feels too heavy, instead of holding tighter, try sitting still. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is the willingness to simply breathe. 6. Letting go of relationships or situations that bring suffering. There's a truth that many of us resist, but sooner or later, we all face it. Not every relationship, not every situation in life is meant to be kept forever. Sometimes we hold on because of love. Sometimes it's out of fear. Fear of being alone, fear of change, fear of hurting someone else. But here's the quiet wisdom that Buddhism offers. If something is constantly draining your energy, if your peace disappears every time you step into that space or speak to that person, it may be a sign. A sign that it's time to loosen your grip. Let me share a story. A friend of mine stayed in a job for years, even though every day she came home exhausted, her shoulders tight, her smile gone. She said, "But I can't leave. I've invested too much. People rely on me." Have you ever felt like that? Stuck in a place that eats away at your joy, but you keep holding on because walking away feels impossible? That's the trap of attachment. We convince ourselves that endurance equals loyalty. But endurance without peace slowly turns into suffering. And suffering, when ignored, begins to harden the heart. Here's what helped her, and maybe it can help you too. She began to ask herself one simple question. Does this relationship or this situation help me grow into the best version of myself? Or does it shrink me, little by little? When the answer was clear, the path became less scary. She didn't quit overnight, but she started planning her way out. And when she finally let go, the relief was immediate. Not because everything became easy, but because she could breathe again. The same is true for relationships. We've all had connections that once felt full of life, but over time, they turned heavy. Conversations became arguments. Presence turned into absence. And yet, we cling. Because the memories were sweet. Because we once promised forever. But forever doesn't mean we must sacrifice our well-being. Letting go doesn't erase the love that once was. It simply acknowledges that what was once nourishing is now causing pain. And here's the tender part. Letting go doesn't always mean cutting someone off harshly. Sometimes it means creating gentle distance. Sometimes it's shifting the role they play in your life. And sometimes, yes, it means walking away completely. But however it looks, the act is the same. It's a reclaiming of your peace. I know this isn't easy. The heart protests. The mind spins stories. What if I regret it? What if they change? What if I never find something better? That fear is natural. But here's something I've learned through my own experiences. Every time I released what was breaking me, life eventually filled the empty space with something kinder, truer, more aligned. It's like unclenching your fist. As long as you keep it tight around something sharp, you're bleeding. The moment you open it, healing begins. So let me ask you, are there relationships or situations in your life right now that consistently drain you? Places where your peace feels out of reach, no matter how hard you try? If something came to mind just now, don't ignore it. That might be your heart whispering, it's time. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to let go of a relationship, a friendship, or even a job because it was stealing your energy? If you feel comfortable, share your experience in the comments. Not only could it help someone else, it might remind you of how far you've come. Remember, letting go is not about giving up. It's about choosing peace over suffering. It's about honoring the truth that love without freedom is not really love. It's fear. And the beautiful part is, when you release what harms you, you make space for what heals you. Space for relationships that uplift instead of weigh you down. Space for joy that doesn't cost your inner balance. Space for a life that feels like yours again. So if your heart has been heavy, take this as a gentle invitation. Maybe it's time. Maybe letting go is not losing. Maybe it's finally finding yourself again. 7. The benefits after letting go. You know, something beautiful happens the moment we finally let go. At first, it feels like loss, like stepping into empty space with no idea what will catch us. But then, almost quietly, a shift begins. The mind starts to breathe. The heart begins to soften, and what once felt heavy suddenly feels light. This is the first gift of letting go. A lighter mind, a freer heart. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Day after day, you keep walking, convincing yourself you have no choice. And then, one day, you set it down. Do you remember that feeling of sudden lightness after holding something heavy for too long? That's what letting go does to your spirit. I've seen this in myself. I used to hold on to a resentment towards someone who hurt me deeply. I carried it like a badge of honor, telling myself it kept me safe. But the truth, it only weighed me down. The day I finally released it, not because they apologized, but because I chose peace. The air around me felt different. I could laugh more easily. I could sleep without that restless stirring. And here's something even more surprising. When you let go, life doesn't stay empty. It creates space for new opportunities to appear. The job you thought defined you. Once you release it, A door you never imagined suddenly opens. The relationship that was holding you back. When you step away, new connections, healthier ones, begin to form. It's almost as if the universe was waiting for you to unclench your hand so it could place something new inside it. Think about it. How many times in your life have you looked back and realized, if I hadn't let that go, I would have missed this? Maybe it was leaving a toxic friendship, only to discover a deeper, truer bond later. Maybe it was saying no to something that wasn't right, only to say yes to something far more aligned. But perhaps the greatest benefit is this, a peace that no circumstance can take away. When your happiness no longer depends on whether someone approves of you, whether things go exactly as planned, whether life bends to your will, there's a kind of unshakable calm that rises within. It doesn't mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still come. Loss still happens. But you stop being tossed around by every wave. Instead, you become like the deep ocean beneath the waves, steady, still, vast. And I'll be honest, this isn't a one-time achievement. Letting go is not a single act, it's a practice. Sometimes I catch myself gripping again, gripping old fears, old stories. But each time I remember to release, the freedom returns. And it reminds me of the truth. We were never meant to live weighed down. So let me ask you, if you could let go of one thing today, a thought, a memory, a fear, a relationship, what would it be? Imagine how different your life would feel if you weren't carrying that anymore. If you feel inspired, I'd love to hear your reflections in the comments, not just for me, but for the community here. Sometimes, sharing your story is the very act of release you've been waiting for. Letting go is not weakness, it's courage. It's the courage to trust that you don't need to control everything in order to be okay. It's the courage to believe that peace is possible even in this very moment. So the benefits of letting go? They're not abstract. They're real, they're tangible, they're life-changing. A lighter mind, new doors opening, and a deep, steady peace that comes from within, untouched by what happens outside. And when you taste that peace, even just for a moment, you realize, this is the freedom we've been seeking all along. 8. A message from Buddhist teachings. There's a line from the Buddha that has always stayed with me. He said, "If you let go, you will have everything. If you hold on, you will lose everything." At first, those words might sound strange. How can losing something give us everything? But when we sit with them, when we really listen, we realize they hold one of the most profound truths about life. Think about it. Every time we cling to a person, to an expectation, to a story about how life should be, we tighten our fists around something that was never meant to stay. And in doing so, we close ourselves off to what could be waiting for us. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. But when you relax your palms, suddenly the water rests gently, without effort. That's what the Buddha meant. Life flows best when we loosen our grip. I remember when I first came across this teaching. I was in a season of life where I was holding on desperately to a plan I thought was my future, to people I thought I couldn't live without. And the harder I clung, the more exhausted I became. It felt like fighting a current, day after day, until I was out of breath. But one evening, sitting quietly with those words, "If you let go, you will have everything," I realized I wasn't just fighting life. I was fighting myself. And the moment I allowed myself to release, just a little, space opened, peace entered. And what I thought I had lost wasn't loss at all. It was simply transformation. That's the paradox the Buddha was pointing to. When we hold too tightly, we suffer. When we release, we gain freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from endless needing. Freedom to experience life as it truly is, not as we demand it to be. I think this is why so many Buddhist masters speak of emptiness not as a void, but as fullness. Because in emptiness, in the letting go, there is room for joy, for peace, for love that is not chained by conditions. And maybe you felt this in your own life. Have you ever released something you thought you couldn't live without, only to realize later it was the very thing that allowed you to grow? Maybe it was a relationship. Maybe a job. Maybe a version of yourself you thought you had to be. If you feel comfortable, I'd love to invite you to share in the comments what teaching or phrase has stayed with you on your own journey of letting go. Sometimes, your words may be exactly what another soul here needs to hear today. The Buddha's wisdom reminds us, clinging is the root of suffering, but release is the root of peace. And the beautiful thing is, this teaching isn't locked in ancient scriptures. It's alive, here, now, in your daily life. Every moment gives us a choice. Hold on tighter or soften our grip. So let me leave you with this. If you let go, you will have everything. Not everything in the sense of material possessions or life always going our way, but everything that truly matters: peace of mind, freedom of heart, and a deep connection to the present moment. And maybe tonight, before you sleep, you can whisper to yourself, I allow myself to let go. I allow myself to be free. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves is simply the courage to release. Conclusion. As we come to the close of this journey, let's take a breath together. In and out. Gentle, present, here. We've walked through some of the deepest truths of Buddhist wisdom. The courage to release what weighs us down, the freedom that comes from letting go, and the peace that quietly blossoms when we no longer cling to what isn't meant to stay. At its heart, letting go isn't about losing. It's about gaining something greater: space for peace, room for growth, and freedom for joy to flow naturally into our lives. We've talked about releasing toxic relationships, loosening our grip on old stories, and even softening the expectations we place on ourselves. Each of these moments of release opens a doorway, and on the other side of that doorway is freedom. But here's the thing. Wisdom doesn't live in words alone. It lives in practice. And so I want to gently invite you, right here, today, to try just one small act of letting go. Maybe it's releasing a grudge that has been heavy in your heart. Maybe it's setting down a thought that always makes you restless. Or maybe it's as simple as unclenching your hands, breathing deeply, and reminding yourself, I am allowed to be free. Because transformation never begins with tomorrow. It begins with this moment, this breath, this choice. And if you've felt something stir in you while listening, perhaps a sense of calm or a spark of recognition, I'd love to hear about it. What's one thing you feel ready to let go of? You can share in the comments, and in doing so, you may find that your story gives someone else the courage they need. When we come together in this way, we create a space of shared healing, a community where peace isn't just spoken about, it's experienced. Now, if this message has touched you, if it's reminded you that peace is possible even in the chaos of daily life, I invite you to stay connected. You can support this channel by gently pressing like, by subscribing, and by sharing this video with someone you love, not as a routine click, but as a way of planting seeds of peace in more hearts. Imagine what the world could look like if more of us carried this practice of letting go. And remember, this is not the end of the journey. It's simply a pause, a resting point. If you'd like to continue exploring, the next video, The Art of Letting Go, Buddhist Teachings on Freedom, will guide us even deeper into these timeless truths. It's waiting for you whenever you're ready. So as we close, I want to leave you with one simple reminder. You are not defined by what you cling to. You are defined by the freedom you allow yourself to step into. Take this with you into your day. Let it settle in your heart, and know that in every moment, peace is only one breath and one act of letting go away.